what is something everyone believes to be true that you don't, or what are the biggest mistakes people are making that they are oblivious to. Creative people should not pick a niche and should not have a narrow positioning. Firstly, we are all on a spectrum. We are either logical or psychological. It's EQ meets IQ. All I'm saying is either you are extremely emotional or you are extremely logical. You have a whole bunch of business people telling creative people to pick a niche and have a very narrow positioning. The advice is coming from a good place that, hey, look, if you want to stand out in the competition, you want to attract new business and you want to thrive and you want to charge a premium, you got to pick a niche and have a very narrow positioning. But there's a fundamental gap and big hole and big problem with that advice. The number one problem and the biggest problem is creativity happens by being curious and inquisitive and poking your nose in literally everything. Whereas logical professions, surgeons, lawyers, or business people, they thrive on doing the same thing over and over again, looking at projections, looking at revenue, looking at top line, bottom line, looking at COGS, cost of doing business. They thrive in Excel sheets. They thrive in structure. Whereas creative people thrive in chaos. So what I would say is that advice, all these logical people telling psychological people or business people telling creative people to pick a niche and have a very narrow positioning is so ill-informed, it is so problematic, and it is the worst advice you can give to creative people. Now, the problem is there aren't enough creative people standing up and challenging that point of view. Here's what I would say. If you're a creative person and you're curious and inquisitive and nosy about a million things, you don't have to pick a niche and have a very specific kind of positioning. What you need to get really good at and why you're taking that advice in the first place is so that you can attract customers and you can charge a premium. So essentially what's happening is people are looking at your problem, at your symptom, but not going to the cause of it. They're giving you solutions based on your symptom that you're unable to attract clients and charge a premium for your creative work. The advice that they're giving you is, to get noticed amongst all the sea of competition and to be able to recognize patterns because you're doing the same thing over and over again. That is the advice I would give to a lawyer and surgeon, because a surgeon has to perform heart surgery repeatedly, many, many times. And because they've performed that surgery many, many times, they get really good at it and they begin to notice certain patterns. And it's really good in that context, even with, let's say, athletes, somebody who's doing high jump or somebody who plays a very specific sport. They need to train in a certain way. Whereas creative people need to explore, inherently need to be nosy, inquisitive, and curious. Whereas specialists, according to business people, are the people who do the same thing over and over again, like surgeon, lawyers, or maybe even athletes. Logical professions thrive on doing the same thing over and over again. Psychological professions and creative people thrive on doing different things, exploring different ideas, exposing their mind to new ways of doing things. So if you are a creative person listening to this, stop taking that dumb advice. It is the stupidest advice. Instead, focus on the cause, the root cause of that problem. Because you're a creative person, it might be harder to articulate what it is that you offer. That can be solved. And the other challenge that you have is attracting customers. What you actually need to get good at is sales, picking up that phone or sending out cold emails or building relationships with prospective customers and clients, having conversations with them. It's the conversations that's going to change the client's perspective and worldview of, wait a second, how come we've been trying to do it this way and why can't we do it that way? A curious and inquisitive person is going to ask interesting and informed questions. How? Because they're pulling from different areas, from business, from what's happening culturally to what's happening in different categories, not just what's happening with the competition or what the client is doing. Or another way to look at it is creative people operate more like 0 to 1 startups, whereas specialists picking a niche and having a narrow positioning is more closer to companies that have already are settled and established. They have large teams, and now they need subject matter experts because it's a machine and it needs to run on a conveyor belt. Whereas creative people are the one that come in the beginning and figure out what company do we need to make in the first place. So if you're a creative person listening to this, stop taking the advice of logical people who are trying to compare creativity with surgeons, lawyers, and other logical professions where you're just doing the same thing repeatedly, like a large corporate organization. Creative people are the ones who disrupt those kind of corporations. As a creative person, lean into the psychological, lean into the emotional, lean into your curiosity, put your nose and poke your nose in everything, be inquisitive. That is my off the cuff rant about this subject.